My journey through the Super Half series has passed the halfway point. I've completed 4 out of 6 half marathons. After Copenhagen, Berlin and Valencia, it was time for Prague. However, I didn't intend to just run this race. I went with an ambitious personal best goal. How did it go? Today I'll tell you about the organization, what you should know and whether it's worth running the Prague Half Marathon at all. Let's go! The expo, BIP collection and the entire start area are all in the same place at the Holeszowice market grounds. And this is already a big plus because you don't have to go to the middle of nowhere for your BIP, and if you find accommodation for the weekend near the start area, you'll also be close to the BIP pickup. Getting there by public transport is hassle-free. Tram and metro will take you fairly close to the expo entrance. About 16,000 runners participate in the race, so as is usual with big races, it's worth getting your BIP early to avoid crowds. The Prague Half Marathon takes place on Saturday, so Friday sees the biggest crowds. I arrived to the Czech capital on Thursday and went to collect my BIP then. This was a perfect move as I didn't have to wait in line at all, and generally there wasn't much activity. To collect your BIP, you need to go to the stall assigned to your race number, where you get an envelope with your race number, safety pins and a compact backpack. The pack contents are minimal, just how I like it, but I know that for many of you, getting nothing but a number might seem scandalous. If you chose to get a t-shirt during registration, you need to go to another building for that. I didn't get a t-shirt, so I simply skipped that building. Next up was a typical expo, but I must note it was quite a small expo. There were the standard stalls with gels, socks and sports equipment. Among running brands, Keep Run and, not surprisingly, Adidas, the race sponsor, had the largest stalls. There was also a Super Halves booth where you could get an additional race number with text like "My last super race," etc. You could also see the medal you'll receive after completing all the races. Since I was there on Thursday, I didn't encounter any crowds and actually went through the whole expo in about 5 minutes. I paid 55 euros for the race entry, buying it right when sales opened. Prices range from 55 to 95 euros depending on how late you buy it. The entries didn't sell as quickly like for the Berlin or Copenhagen, but you can expect it to be a bit harder to get an entry next year, especially since Berlin, which takes place on the same weekend, will have a lottery system. The race village is in exactly the same place as the expo. It was crowded, but fortunately not so much that you couldn't find open space to get yourself organized before the start. The first thing you encountered in the village are the backdrop and changing rooms. I didn't use the changing rooms, but the backdrop organization was probably the best I've seen at such a large race. There were 100 windows, each assigned to the last 2 digits of your race number. Considering there were about 16,000 runners, each window could have maximum 160 people. Sounds like a lot, but the chances of everyone coming to the same booth at the same time were minimal, and indeed I didn't wait at all to drop my bag. I was first in line, and after the race I was probably second to collect it, so lightning fast. Toilets could be found at the entrances to the different zones and throughout the race village. There were many, but the lines were also long. I didn't use them, so I can't comment on how quickly they moved. However, it says a lot that there were rows of men by the river who decided they wouldn't wait in lines. I wasn't a saint either, though I found a slightly more secluded spot than the river. There was a limited space for warming up. Many of us were running along the narrow path by the river. Some people were warming up in the start area, but it got increasingly crowded there and a proper warm-up became difficult. The start corrals assignment from race numbers were actually quite well enforced. Not perfectly, but well. Volunteers were also walking through the corrals, checking if anyone was there who shouldn't be. Each wave also had pacers. In mine there were pacers for 1:30 and 1:40. I wanted to stick with the former, but quickly lost sight of them and only caught up again. Well, more on that in a moment. It's crowded at the start, as always, but I feel it wasn't too bad. It's dense, but you can pass slower runners without major problems. Besides, the course itself helps control early enthusiasm, because in the first 2 kilometers you face 2 uphill sections under bridges. You run constantly around the Vltava river, with Letna Gardens on the other side. At the Prague Metronome, we cross the river and begin the section through the city center, which is also when you encounter lots of cobblestones. There's also many tram tracks, but that's normal throughout the course. After passing Charles Bridge and running a bit more through the old town, we return to the western bank on the river. There awaits a long 3-kilometer straight. It's a bit boring, we're just running through the city past factories and warehouses. At the end of the straight section there's a turnaround and almost 3 kilometers back, most of which felt slightly uphill. After 10k we return to the old town, do a small loop near Vyšehrad. Here again some cobblestones, slightly uphill and lots of tracks. Then we enter the actual center, definitely the most picturesque part of the route, but also where there's the most cobblestones, in places very uneven, so you need to be careful. From 15k we have another long 4.5 kilometers straight through the Karlin district. Here we again face several downhills and uphills, including one through the tunnel. The end of this section is in a very quiet part of the city where not much happens along the course. Around 19.5 kilometers is what I consider the worst climb of the entire course. It's a rather short but steep climb onto a bridge. At this stage of the race, for many it will be the final nail in the coffin, and you need real determination to still accelerate from this point. The last kilometer is flat, running essentially around the race village. 100 meters before the finish line we have cobblestones covered with a red carpet. Whoever came up with this idea, I don't know, but it was a very stupid idea. The carpet makes it hard to tell whether the cobblestones underneath are even or not, and I was seeing stars when I finished. The Prague Half Marathon does well in terms of on-course nutrition. 8 stations were set up roughly every 3 kilometers starting from the 5k point. Water in cups, there were also some isotonic drinks, and anything else? Honestly, I don't know. I wasn't paying any attention to that during the race. There were also toilets at every station. Kilometer markers were visible, definitely a plus. Looking at the big picture, sometimes there were more spectators, sometimes fewer, but generally you can count on support along most of the course. The worst sections for support were between 6th and 9th kilometer, and also between about 18.5 and 20.5 kilometers. Only in the last 600 meters did it really get loud. At the finish, I had a medium length walk. Ahead of me, along the way, I received a medal, 0 beer and a banana, and an isotonic drink. Then after a short walk back to the race village, I collected my bag without waiting in line, also got my medal engraved, which went quite smoothly too. There were several food stands in the village, so if anyone wanted to get something to eat, they had that option here. Of course, there were also options to drink Czech beer. Am I satisfied with my trip to Prague Half Marathon? Oh yes, even though it was probably the hardest race of my life due to the course itself and constant headwind, the result made up for everything. My goal was to break 1:30. In ideal conditions, I think this would have been doable without problems, but here after 5 to 10k I felt it might not be my day. However, I was running with my friend and somehow together we managed to keep pushing each other. We managed to make up for some early losses, and despite small crisis on the climb at 19.5 kilometers, I crossed the finish line in exactly 1 hour, 29 minutes and 47 seconds. Such personal bests are doubly satisfying. Do I recommend the Prague Half Marathon? Let me put it that way. I know better races you could go to, but Prague is definitely more budget-friendly from a Polish perspective. If you like running and sightseeing, this is a good option. If you are looking for a super fast course, I'd choose something else. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments what your experiences with the Prague Half Marathon are. Of course, I encourage you to subscribe to this channel and visit me on Instagram and TikTok. See you in the next video.